to deal with it. San Luis Obispo right now, the city is doing a great job. We've got Officer Jim Fellows and Jeremy Barons that are assigned to work with a lot of these folks that are the repeat offenders that are homeless. Quite frankly, in fact, I was just dealing with one today, a gentleman who's been an alcoholic for years and years. He's back on the streets, he'll come back to court, he'll go back on the streets, and he'll come back to court. What we need for these people that are alcoholics is we need a residential treatment facility here, either within our county or nearby, so that we can send some people there so that they have a good program that works that'll help them deal with their addictions. And so while I can't do that as district attorney, I can be involved, and I want to reach out in the community to find folks in our business community, in our service clubs and organizations to say, let's make it happen. Let's find a place where we can build it, find a building where we can house it, or maybe an area, and implement a program that works. In Indio, where I started out in Riverside County as a prosecutor, they had a program there called ABC Recovery. It's a phenomenal program. The courts loved it because you sent somebody there and they were going to get very good treatment. It was tough, it was hard to make it through, but it worked. We need a program like that here in our county.
And the program that Dan's talking about, we've been working on for about a year now. And I can tell you that the Community Intervention Court is something I've been working on since Chief Gazelle first brought it to the District Attorney's Office. And I've worked on it with those officers. And I've been a primary point of contact with both the court and the officers. And I'm glad Dan's listening at each of the forums we go to, because he's heard me say, because I sit on the county's behavioral health oversight, that we need a detox facility. We need two. We need a medical facility. That's one kind. We also need a sobering station. We need two different things for those people that are downtown. And so we're dealing with those on a regular basis. We're finding courtrooms. It's going to be combined with one of the other behavioral health courts. And I'm proud to tell you, as I stand here today, that the folks who are actually addressing these issues every single day, Denise Braun at Mental Health, Kathy Bianchi at the Sheriff's Department, the Mental Health Liaison, Jeremy Barons, the CAT team that you read about, these are all folks who've endorsed my candidacy because I work with them daily. They were in my office just a few weeks ago. Actually, they were in my office last week discussing problems related to the homelessness and how we were going to deal with certain individuals. This is something that, again, is not theory from me or that I've heard from somebody else. These are things I've been working on with these committees, with these offices for well over a year now.
Thank you. Tim, you get to go first on this one. SLO County has a mental health, drug, and vets court. What's your opinion on establishing a domestic violence court in San Luis Obispo County?
You know, that's one court that I haven't looked into. I think it's not a bad idea, but like every other court, what we have to do is you can't do that independently. Every court we've done, from drug court to Veterans Treatment Court to Community Intervention Court, is you have to decide whether or not the numbers that you have actually justify that, and whether or not at some point in time, right now I believe we're up to 7 treatment courts. We have 6 courtrooms. We have 6 judicial officers who have to hear regular calendars. We prosecute 18,000 cases a year, right? So you have to figure out and work with those folks, but we will be working with those folks, and it's something that's been floated for 2 or 3 years now. And right now, I couldn't stand here and say that I think that's a good idea. I certainly wouldn't say it's a bad idea, because I think we're doing a very good job in our office with most domestic violence.
Here's where you're going to see a big difference. I absolutely believe in starting a domestic violence court. We absolutely need it here. And one of the reasons is one of the reasons that my opponent just talked about. We have 6 different courts in our county. Domestic violence is an insidious problem, and it has a lot of issues in domestic violence. And I've been a domestic violence prosecutor now for the last 3.5 years here, and I did it in Riverside County before coming here. I'm proud of working on that assignment. My opponent has never had that assignment in the 21 years he's been a prosecutor. I'll tell you that domestic violence cases are absolutely important. They're some of the most difficult cases to handle. And one of the reasons why they're difficult is because there's so many myths out there. Even members of the bench have, I think, because they're human beings, have myths about domestic violence. And so right now we have 6 different courts, 6 different types of justice every time a domestic violence case comes into our county. Some judges will issue protective orders. Some judges never will if a victim doesn't want it. The importance of having a domestic violence court is to have fairness and equity and make sure that domestic violence is being treated the same in our county so that we can reduce it. If they go to one court because their name happens to start with an A and they don't get treated the way that they should and they don't get a tough sentence, and then somebody else goes into a different department because their name starts with G, what kind of a system is that? A domestic violence court will invest in someone who knows those cases inside and out. They can hold them accountable. We'll have the treatment provider in court to make sure that we finally make an impact in putting an end to domestic violence in our community.
Well, I think Dan's selling me short a little bit. When he says I haven't had a domestic violence caseload, he's actually mistaken. I actually was on the domestic violence court's advisory committee back when he was in undergraduate, I think, or law school. And what I can tell you is, he also likes to say I haven't had a sexual assault assignment, but I can tell you that I've done jury trials in domestic violence, and in addition to that, I have also done jury trials involving rape. I don't believe Dan's done a jury trial in either of those, not in this county. Certainly not a felony. So.
All right, and Tim, we'll start with you again. What steps have you already taken to educate yourself and your staff on the issue of human trafficking, nationally, statewide, locally, particularly locally?
I've actually read several manuals. I've done one MCLE course. It's a training course, but the most important thing I've done is make sure that other folks were able to do it. I authorized Dan to go to a conference on human trafficking because I was his supervisor. I've authorized the head of our victim witness to go to a human trafficking conference, and I've recommended that 2 other deputies go to human trafficking. As the assistant district attorney, I can't get away to every conference, but what I can do is make sure that those conferences are available to our folks for training. And we will continue to have more training because it's an important thing. It's actually an epidemic, and it's everywhere. It's not just in the big cities where they have large task forces, but it's here in our county too. And so the way I deal with it for myself is to make sure that I keep our people educated, going to the right trainings, and have them train other people in our office.
Yeah, this is an area that I have worked very intensively, actually. And last October was the DA assigned to a human trafficking case right here in our county that involved 2 young women, teenage women that were brought in here by a gang from the valley. And they were trafficked in the sex trade. They were forced to do a whole lot of horrible things with a lot of different quote-unquote customers. And the human trafficking issue largely goes under the radar. We don't like to think it happens here, but it's very real. If you go online to redbook.com or some of these other online websites that are really just supposed to link up to consenting adults, that's not what they're about. That might be what part of the website is about. But that's the #1 tool in purveying children in the sex trade. It's happening. Gangs are doing it across the state and across the nation. They're bringing these young people into our county. In this particular case, fortunately, one of them was able to get away, and the case was able to be solved by work with the FBI. I worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office with another county to make sure that they had everything that they needed in way of cooperation from our law enforcement offices here, the San Luis Obispo Police Department, and our office here, working with them. Either we could have prosecuted the case or they could have. And it was through discussions with the U.S. Attorney's Office that the decision was made to have them prosecute the case. But my point is that prostitution and sexual liaisons create a demand in our community, and you wouldn't know it, but that supports child human trafficking. We must do everything we can to combat that.
Thank you. Dan, I'd like to start with you for this next question. Do you have aspirations to have a higher office beyond that of district attorney? And if so, could you please discuss that?
Honestly, I don't see any office that would be a higher calling. And no, I have absolutely no interest in serving in any kind of legislative position or anything other than being your district attorney. I'm very proud of the work that I do as a prosecutor, and I'll tell you, it was fun to work in Silicon Valley in internet industry when things were going gangbusters. It was a lot of fun and it was exciting, but it didn't bring a whole lot of the intrinsic value of working. I didn't have a whole lot of, I didn't really feel great when I came home at night just because I sold a couple of $1 million servers. It was fun, it was good. But the reason I went to law school is because I wanted to do something that had a positive impact in our community. I absolutely love being a prosecutor, and I love serving our country in the Army. But comparing all of what I've done, I would say that the most satisfying job is working in the public safety sector with men and women that wear the badge and carry the gun and work out on our streets on the front lines every day. I mean, being in the military is great as well, but we go when we're called upon. Working in law enforcement every single day, we're working tough cases. We're doing things that are important to secure the safety of our community. And so I absolutely love what I'm doing as a prosecutor. I wouldn't want to go away. I'd be letting my colleagues down, number one, if I were using this as a stepping stone to go do something else. I'd be letting my family down because I've left. I've gone to Iraq and I've gone to Kosovo. I don't want to leave this community. We love it here. My wife, Wendy, who I'd like to introduce, is right here in the front row. I'm proud of the fact that we're raising our children here. I don't want to go to Sacramento or Washington or anywhere else. There's no place I'd rather be than right here in San Luis Obispo.
Well, after a couple of decades, I think it's pretty clear I'm not going anywhere. So, and I also happen to be, I'm a career prosecutor, and it's not just a word for me. A few years, it doesn't make you a career prosecutor. A career prosecutor means you've had a career, and I've had a career. And I've had a career that began at the bottom, all the way up to litigating in the U.S. Supreme Court and working on death penalty cases. I'm a career prosecutor and the only candidate before you that's never run for another elected office, never run in a political office. For the last 21 years, what I have done is the most apolitical, non-political job in the world. I enforce the law. That's all I do. And it's a little bizarre that I have to go through this process to get to the next step where I will be the most apolitical, non-political person in the county. Because what I believe in is only enforcing the law. So I think it's kind of an obvious answer. I have no other aspirations.
Thank you. Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. We've been discussing at the table whether or not we should ask this question, but we will. Yes. And Dan, we'll start with you with this one. Would you support the legalization of marijuana in California?
Well, since I just prefaced this by saying I'm not seeking a legislative position, I would not personally, and the reason why is because I've seen what marijuana can do to young people. And right now, the great problem that we have in our community in terms of the danger to our children isn't marijuana directly. It's heroin. It's the gangs that are coming into our community. Heroin is being pushed on young people, but you know what is often used as a gateway drug, is something that lowers young people's inhibitions, and maybe they'll try something like heroin where they wouldn't have before, is if they've been exposed to marijuana. So I think for our youth, we absolutely have to aggressively prosecute people that are dealing even marijuana to our children, to our youth. That shouldn't happen. They should not be faced with that. But ultimately, the real harm, as I said, is the drug like heroin. We've lost about 8 youth in the north part of our county just in the last 2 years. They're dying with needles in their arms. I mean, this isn't the 70s. This is 2014, and young people have access to it. They've reformed